Okay, well, let me welcome all of you to chat with Matt. We have a very special duo here of Reed Phillips and Charles Slack. We're going to get started with introductions, of course. That's one of the things we do. But before I turn the meeting over to our two stars, I just wanted to share with you that I did read their book. And what struck me about the book is that it's as much a strategy book as it is a valuation book. The way I have seen valuation over the years and discussed with me has been more like an autopsy on a business. And I think this is more of a biopsy. And what I really liked about the book is the degree to which it requires everybody in the company to get involved and to really learn their own business and what drives it. So without any further ado, I'm going to spotlight our two guests today, and they're going to introduce themselves. So Reed Phillips, why don't you go first and give us a little quick story of how you got yourself into this mess.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. I started my career out of college as an as a business executive, and during that time, I was also an entrepreneur. Started several companies, and then eventually moved into investment banking, and that's something I've been doing for 35 years, and that's really given me a lot of perspective on how mid-sized business owners think about their businesses, and that's what led to Charlie and I writing the book QuickValue, because it was really a kind of driven by the lessons I learned over the years, where I found that a lot of business owners didn't have a good handle on what their companies were worth, and wanted to provide kind of a guideline for owners to use to measure the value of that they were creating in their companies. And to make it to do it kind of on a simpler basis. An awful lot of the books on valuation are 1,000 pages long and have all kinds of complex formulas that, even though I took fairly advanced math classes in college, I have a hard time getting my mind wrapped around. But we wanted to come up with something that was user friendly, and that resulted in the book. And then, of course, as you may have mentioned, Matt, one of my former business partners, Ken Collins, who worked in my firm doing investment banking with us for many years, he's the one who's been connected to you and recommended that we do this session today. So I want to give a shout out to Ken.
Yep, our munificent benefactor. Charles, why don't you jump in here?
Oh, I'm Charlie Slack, and I started out my career as a newspaper reporter, first as a feature writer, and then went into business reporting. I went out on my own about 25 years ago as an independent writer. Everybody said, "How can you leave such a secure business as the newspaper industry?" And this was right as the internet was getting going, and so I guess my timing was unintentionally pretty good to go out on my own. But I have written a number of books, historical books, some business books, and over the years, I've supported myself as a business and financial writer, working a lot with large financial institutions and writing a lot about business owners, mid-sized businesses, small businesses. And over the years, I've come to understand some of the real challenges they face, including the idea of valuation and understanding what the business is worth and where to take it, and sort of the conflict between trying to take care of daily business and having the opportunity to step back and see, where is the business going, where are we building value, and so forth. And so when I was introduced to Reed and learned about his ideas and had the opportunity to work with him on a book, it was just a great journey, and that we're still on.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to writing a book. My wife Peggy has written two books, and I know the struggles that you go through to write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And just as everyone needs a coach, you're stepping in and helping Reed put his big ideas into an appropriate format. I assume you'll share a little bit of that story with us as well.
Sure.
Yeah, happy to. And the collaboration was really great because, as Charlie mentioned, he's done a lot of work with businesses and companies, and he really understands how they work. And so his perspective was really important in going kind of back and forth on things that would be included in the book versus things that we decided not to include.
Yeah, well, that's as important as what's in the book, right? What
It
will leave
is. It
out,
sure is. Yep.
I'll
which is a
return
good
the
segue into
compliment.
value creation, actually.
Yeah. Well, I'll return the compliment and say that Reed is an excellent writer too. So we had, I don't know, it was just one of the best sort of writing partnerships that I've had the pleasure to be part of.
That's great. That's great. Everybody, like I said, everybody needs a coach. Even the greatest football players and basketball players have coaches. And sometimes you just need somebody to smack you upside the head and say, no, that doesn't need to be in there. Or you're going on and on and on about nothing. It can be very helpful. So why don't you jump into the big ideas behind value creation? Why value creation?
Well, we think it's something that's underappreciated in companies and by CEOs and CFOs. And it's something that really is, in our view, the most critical um, measurement in terms of how a business is performing. A lot of the clients I work with will talk about the revenue that they're achieving and the EBITDA and how they're progressing from one year to the next. The problem with that is you could be in an industry where overall valuations are going down, even though your particular business is performing well and you're not even really aware of it. So you need to be cognizant of all the factors that impact the value of your business. And that's one of the big arguments Charlie and I make in the book is that this isn't something that evaluation isn't something that should be done on an irregular basis, as most mid-sized companies do. It should be done once a year. It should be part of your overall planning process. You perform a budget every year. Hopefully, you're doing a strategic plan every year. And evaluation would really be the third piece of what we think is important
Yeah.
for mid-sized companies. And when you
My
don't
own
do
impression
about,
is that
oh,
standard valuation is just a static thing. Your book
right.
seems to take value creation and make it very dynamic.
Oh yeah, thank you, thank you. Exactly. What happens is the companies I've worked with, they'll say, "Oh yeah, we had a valuation done 5 years ago, and we know what the number was, and it was done because one owner was selling his shares to the other owner, or it was done because uh, someone was interested in buying the company and they wanted to figure out what the company was worth." But then there's a long lapse between, doing that valuation and the current time when, again, the numbers can change, but the owners often are still thinking about that valuation from 5 years ago.
And or
Yeah.
maybe a bank, you're going for financing and the bank has ordered a valuation. And what the traditional valuation methods, I think, don't enable you to look at sort of the underlying closely at your business. And one of the things that I was most intrigued by with Reed's idea was the idea of using value drivers, which most people are familiar with that idea, but using a deep assessment of your company's value drivers as a central component. So you really learn from the process rather than that external a person doing evaluation.
Yeah. I was very impressed with that part of your book, which is drawing in all the key players and getting them to
Mhm.
actually understand what drives the business and enabling them to use it in their day-to-day work.
Yeah, and really, to be honest, in most companies, we don't see that kind of understanding of the business at across departments. So you don't,
Hmm.
the head of sales isn't talking with the CEO and the CEO and the head of operations about what the company is worth and how they're increasing value and if they're doing all the things that will improve the value of the company. Instead, they're just very focused on their own areas. Sales is all about more sales each year. And again, not taking into account what impact it has on the overall profitability of the company. We did just work with a company that was very effective at sales. Their revenue was over 100 million, and they told us at the beginning of the year that their EBITDA was going to be about a little bit more than 10%, about 11 or 12 million. Well, we were working with them selling the company, and by the end of the year, their EBITDA came in at 5 million, and that's because there was no connection between the folks that were selling and the folks that were having to deliver on the sales.
Mhm.
So the cost of actually delivering was much higher because the salespeople were promising things to clients that they shouldn't have been promising.
Yeah.
So they
Well, you know,
right.
the classic CFO joke is we're losing money at variable cost, but we're going to make it up in volume.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So keep going.
Uh,
You're doing a great job at talking about value creation.
sure, sure. So, what one of the things that we tried to highlight in the book is your ability to kind of see the strengths and weaknesses of your own company, and to take those into account and how they impact value creation. We used a total of 45 value drivers, and we don't think 45 apply to every company. We think somewhere between 8 and 12 would apply to every company. But that is something that is information that's really at hand at the company level. So the key execs in the company should be able to assess which value drivers are number one, the appropriate ones for your business, and number
Mhm.
two, the ones that they can kind of evaluate and rate, vis-a-vis other competitors in the industry to see how they think you're performing.
Yeah, I particularly like in your book that whole idea that people don't always know uh, which the comparable companies are. They have some
That's true.
misunderstandings about their own business,
Yeah, yeah,
as to what
that's true.
business they're actually in.
Right. And hopefully, just going through this exercise will help with that. It'll help. I found when I did this exercise with several companies, and it gets the executives talking to one another. They may disagree as they're trying to sort out which value drivers are the important ones
Hmm.
and how they should be rated. But it's a good discussion to have, and it brings everybody together and working on something that's really important.
And brings them some agreement. I think the hidden agenda in your book is that you're getting all the key players to talk to each other.
Right. Yep.
I mean, they
Yep.
might even come to the point where they don't even want to sell the company. Has that happened from your review?
Sure, that definitely can
Got them
happen.
so excited about their company they decided not to sell.
Sometimes, exactly. Sometimes they think they realize that there's a lot more potential that they should be harvesting rather than the buyer. And so, why sell now when a year or two from now we could maybe substantially increase the value?
You started talking about it, but you maybe want to beat the drum a little bit more about why companies avoid uh, their valuation,
Yeah,
or they
Charlie?
never get around to it.
Yeah, well, I think it's the idea that that valuations typically are external and they're imposed on companies. Companies feel like they're so companies tend to maybe look on them as a burden imposed because they've got to do it because there may be a sale coming up or they're looking for financing or whatever. And so they tend to be time consuming, expensive, and a distraction. So they haven't sort of adopted the mindset that maybe this is a strategic plus for our business to engage in valuation. So, it's how can we get past this as quickly as possible and move on with our real business instead of
Yeah, our real work.
instead of seeing it as intrinsic to our real work and something that should be done as part of it, as a natural part of our work.
Yeah, that's why I tried to, when Charlie and I talked about it, I tried to tie the concept of valuation together, wrap it around with your budgeting process and your strategic planning
Yeah,
process. So
right.
it just becomes a yearly occurrence, and it's just part of what you do. And when you do those other two things, it kind of makes the valuation work easier. You've got a lot of the information at hand already. But I think the biggest reason is that companies just decide not to spend the time on it. They don't see the importance. I see the importance because um, our company, we've sold about 500 businesses, and we're valuing businesses every day. So I had a company call today and say, yes, they want to go the next step with us, and they'd like for us to do a valuation. Well, we like to do a valuation of a potential client because it makes sure that we're all aligned. We may do I did a back of the envelope valuation for somebody earlier this week on the phone. He talked to other investment banks, but I told him his particular business I thought was worth between 6 and 8 times EBITDA. And that's because we've sold other businesses just like his recently. So we have very fresh information about what buyers are willing to pay. He said, well, another investment banker told me 13 times, and others told me 9 to 10. So I'm kind of hoping for 9 times. And I said, look, I'm hoping for 9 times too if we work with you. But I have to tell you that we're honestly ballparking your valuation in the 6 to 8 times range. And if we work with you and you decide not to sell because you get valuations in that range, that wouldn't be a good use of our time or your time.
Yeah.
And that's still all based on sort of external. What does the industry look like? What does the current market look like? Not what does our business look like inside.
I think also, Reed, you make a good point that it's just a back of the envelope calculation
Correct.
initially.
Correct. Yeah.
Until you really get in there and do a biopsy on the whole thing, you don't know. You might go in there and find out it's worth a lot more.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's so many factors. One of the things that happens a lot with entrepreneurial owned businesses and mid-sized businesses is that they'll tell you their revenue and EBITDA, but then they forget to tell you that we have a business coach and we pay him 100,000 a year, and a new buyer won't need that. And then last year we spent $500,000 on making, some one-time improvements. Well, all that should get added back to the EBITDA. Those are one-time events and owner benefits. So it boosts the EBITDA up. And as you just said, it could turn out that the business is worth more than you think at first blush. And so you need to kind of dig in and get that additional information. And then in the value drivers really illuminate the value because one of the key things we find in some businesses is they may have a client concentration issue where 60% of their revenue comes from one client. For example, we were selling an agency business and 60% of the revenue came from Procter and Gamble. We made the argument to buyers that it was 15 different divisions of Procter and Gamble because they have so many products. But some buyers still thought, oh, well, if Procter and Gamble just decides to stop doing business with this company, they're going to tank, and so we're not gonna be interested in buying the company. But again, those are the kinds of things that have to be realized about a company, and they all get thrown into the mix when you're trying to determine the value.
And we've talked about some of the benefits of valuation, but one of the things we address a lot is sort of the risks of not having this information
Yes.
and at hand. And some examples are, say, maybe family-owned businesses in particular that for sentimental reasons may hold on to a legacy division that's great-grandparents had a hand in, but it's sort of slowly drying up, but money keeps going into it, where there are areas of the business with more growth potential that maybe are being neglected, or companies decide, well, we're going to go for it and try to grow the business even though they've got a good offer on the table. I know, Reed, we talk about some of these, and you've had a lot of experience with companies that sort of made wrong-headed or misguided decisions based on not having done the valuation process.
Yeah, and one of the big fallacies we see is that um, companies and owners are using valuation metrics that they pick up at conferences and just talking with other owners. So they may talk to an owner who says, well, I sold my business for 10 times EBITDA. And there may be really specific reasons why that owner got 10 times. Your business may be worth 14 times, or it may be worth 6 times, but it not necessarily worth 10 times just because you're in the same industry and you have a business that you think is similar. There really has to be an examination of the characteristics of each of the businesses to understand why they're valued the way they are.
Yeah, I used when I was at CBS, I used to get into discussions. Our division was in college textbook publishing. There were other publishers in that space, and they beat us up over our metrics. And I would say, I know what's in my numbers. I don't know what's in their numbers.
That's exactly right.
Like your
Yep.
friend who met somebody at a conference and said, "Oh, you don't know what's in their numbers."
No, no, exactly. There isn't a lot of transparency when you hear about companies that sold. Um, you might, first of all, some owners like to inflate the value when they're telling stories at the conference. So they're not going to
Sure.
tell you that they sold for 7.5 times EBITDA. They're going to round it up to 10 times because it sounds better. Um, Also, they're not going to tell you that. They only got half of the purchase price at closing, and the rest is on an earnout, and they have to achieve certain benchmarks that are fairly aggressive. So they don't share all of that information, and that's information that you need to have to properly determine, what the value was that was achieved.
Yeah. Again, I think the big thing on your book is the learning that takes place about what drives their business and how other people are measuring it.
Yeah, and one of our thoughts is that this is really something that uh, we think is right up the alley for financial executives. So Charlie and I think that probably the CFO or the controller in a company is the person to lead this process rather than the CEO. Uh, you might have ideally the CEO, might just be somewhat involved or allow the other executives to put this together. But you don't necessarily um, want someone trying to drive the valuation to the number that they want to achieve. You want uh, a fairly, you want a process and putting the valuation together that's kind of democratic and comes through various folks in the company who are seeing the company from different perspectives. So you might have the head of sales who knows exactly um, why your company's products sell better than your competitors' products, and have all that information, and that gets kind of rolled into the valuation.
As we were discussing earlier, there's comparables and there's comparables. There are no two totally identical companies in the world,
Exactly, and that
especially in the middle market. Wouldn't you
yeah,
agree?
And that is one of the fallacies we see in traditional valuation, and we try to overcome that. And a lot of one of the ways, and we'll talk when we get a little further along in the conversation, we'll talk
Mhm.
about the exact process we use. But the process is designed to overcome the fact that um, I see valuations that are prepared, um, and often they're taking just the midpoint, the median number, and it's
Oh,
a
sure.
number that they'll look at the industry and they'll take kind of a median number and say, well, your uh, valuation should be 6.5 times EBITDA because that's the median that's used for the industry. And I just see a big fallacy in that because that means that all companies are worth 6.5 times in that industry.
Yeah, I
And
think what we say in the book, no, there's no such thing as an average company.
Yeah.
So that's part of this discovery is finding where you fit on a range.
Mhm.
yeah, exactly,
Uh,
exactly. So
So yeah, I think with this as a tool, it's possible for even mid-sized companies to do their own valuation.
correct. Yeah, we really work to make it something that can be done internally with your own folks rather than having to hire an outside expert. I've done work, and Ken Collins, when he was one of my partners, he did a lot of work on valuations, and um, you can't possibly know as much about a company as the internal executives, even though we might spend a couple of weeks working on the valuation and trying to understand the company. There's just no way we're going to get to that level that the internal execs are going to get to. And so that's a huge advantage in valuing a company. Now, when buyers look at part of what we tried to do is we tried to look at valuation the same way buyers do when they're buying a company. They don't just use revenue and EBITDA and multiples to figure out how much they're going to pay for a company. They get under the hood and they look at value drivers and they figure out what the company is worth to them based on a lot of things that they're evaluating. And remember, buyers, when they really get under the hood, they're doing due diligence for anywhere from 45 to 90 days. And they're looking at everything about the business. They're looking at contracts and all kinds of things, and all of that is going into the mix when they determine how much they're willing to pay for a company.
I think it's true that most companies are sold to strategics as opposed to financial buyers.
Right, right, that's right.
So the overview is very helpful what the company is generally speaking worth, but the strategics really dig in to find out where they can save a lot of money
They do.
or make
Yep.
a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yep. Yep.
So why don't you discuss the quick value process, since probably no one other than the three of us have actually read the book today. Maybe Ken did.
Ken did. He
I'm sure he
gave
did.
me he critiqued some of the things we had in the book and was very helpful.
So why
I
don't you
definitely.
discuss the process?
Yeah, Charlie, you want to start?
Well, sure. I think the first part is maybe we could talk a little bit about how you select the team, and I think
Yes.
there are the central to this, is this idea of the value driver. So you don't just want financial people. Maybe the CFO is leading, or if you have a chief strategy officer, and so you've got the financial people, but then you want to get somebody sort of from the creative side. Maybe that's the head of sales or a product manager or something who's going to be kind of a reality check to some of the financial assumptions and tell you what they're sort of hearing on the front lines, so to speak. And so the first big step is to identify the essential value drivers. There's a the we've got a list of 45 possible value drivers, and through intensive discussions, you whittle that down until you maybe you whittle it down to 25, and then you get down to an ultimate list of 8 to 10 that are absolutely essential to your company, and then you're going to give each of one of those a score on how you're performing on a basis of 0 to 10. And it's an essential point that that this is not sort of your greatest hits. You're not finding sort of the 8 to 12 things you do best. They're the 8 to 12 things that you really can't be in business without, that you're sunk if you're not doing well on. And then you've got to be very, very honest in sort of self-evaluating how you're doing on that. And that sort of provides not just your ultimate, it's not just central to the calculation of what your value is, but it also gives you a great sort of place to go from in terms of how you're going to create value moving forward.
Yeah, one of the things I like to add is that when you're going through this exercise, if you're trying, it's hard to look at your own company, just like it's hard to look at your own. If I'm looking at myself and saying, what do I need to do to improve to become a better person? I need some feedback, from other people that I'm interacting with. It's very hard to be self-critical, but the way I suggest doing it a lot of times when people are thinking about using value drivers is to pretend that you're looking at buying your own company, and what questions would you ask and what issues would rise to the top and be really the important issues if you were buying your own company and trying to figure out how much it was worth. What would you want to know about it, and think about it that way, so that you kind of are pulling away a little bit from any biases that you may have internally. And sometimes that helps in how people think about this process.
And from among that list of 45, there are some things that are identified sort of as key value drivers that are going to apply to just about any business. Things like market size, market share, profitability, and so forth. Then there are some value drivers that may apply to some businesses and not to others, like product life cycle, or innovation, which may be very important if you're running a tech company, but if you produce artisan cheese based on a 2,000-year-old recipe, aren't going to apply so much. Franchise relationships, obviously, if that's the business you're in, will be very, very important to you, but not if you don't have franchises. So that's why it's sort of this thorough appraisal of this list to find the ones that most apply to you. And then maybe, Reed, you want to talk a little bit about how that scoring process works.
Sure. Well, again, as Charlie mentioned, we suggest rating each value driver on a score of 0 to 10. So 10s being the best, 0, of course, the worst. And if you're using, say, 10 value drivers, and in this case, every value driver's got a possible score of 10, that gives you 100 in total. If you look at all your scores after evaluating each value driver and you come up at 50%, well, then you're going to use your 50% as the number against your EBITDA range. So if your EBITDA range turns out to be 6 to 8 times, 50% is going to be 7 times. So that's going to be where you fall on the scale. If you were at 100%, then it would be 8 times. If you were at 0%, it would be 6 times, in that example. So that's how the value driver score relates to your multiple and what your business is worth. And again, a kind of an overriding theme of the book is that not all companies should be valued at the same EBITDA multiple. It depends on value drivers that are the key characteristics that drive the value of your business.
I could see the secondary value here the key executives are not only learning about how people think about their business, but also they're learning from each other. And they're
Oh
learning
yeah,
about
very
ways
much
to
so.
improve the business to drive up their quick value on something. One of the 45 categories.
Right, right, right. Yeah, and that's the tricky part. I mean, you definitely put your finger on it. What happens sometimes if you have, as Charlie was mentioning, four executives, well, the head of sales might want to say, well, we deserve a 10 in sales. And somebody else, the CFO, might say, well, I don't know about that, that's the value of having the discussion internally and compromising and coming up with a score that everyone's so comfortable with. And one thing that Charlie often says when we have these discussions is it's important to realize that if you have a low score, if it's 5 out of 10, there's nothing wrong with that. Gives you a chance to improve. If you can get up to an 8 or a 9,
Yes.
you've just increased the value of your company in a very nice way.
Yeah, I think the idea is that there's sort of, at first you might think, well, the temptation is to just inflate your scores, but there's a real value in brutal honesty in this process because especially if you're thinking of valuation as a part of your ongoing your operations, which is the premise of the book, that you really want to, I sort of make an analogy, but to using the step counter on your phone when you walk. And if your goal is to have 10,000 steps a day, now there's a feature on there, a little plus sign, and you can click that and give yourself 5,000 steps to start the day. But if your goal is to exercise and improve your health, you're not doing yourself any good by artificially inflating that. By the same token, if you can get buy-in from the team about the importance of being very honest, and that it's gonna, as Reed was saying, these things are going to be uncovered by savvy buyers anyway, but being brutally honest with yourself is going to give you information and sort of a path to improvement and building value year on year.
Yeah. As I always say, if you can't afford the operation, have the x-ray touched up.
There you go. I like it.
And we think about the valuation methodology and QuickValue as being qualitative and quantitative. The qualitative part is the value drivers because that's really, somewhat subjective. Not everybody's going to maybe come to the same scores on the value drivers. Maybe not everyone's going to agree on which ones are most important. But that's a very important process to go through in our valuation methodology. And then, of course, the second piece is quantitative, and that's really looking at values of similar companies and figuring out kind of what the multiples are for the similar companies. We suggest in the book that you use public companies because the public company information is immediate, it's current, whereas a lot of valuations are based on comparable transactions. The problem with comparable transactions is, and I see this all the time in valuations, there may not be that many in your industry where you can get good information and you can figure out what the multiples were. So people doing the valuation work, the experts on valuation, will go back a couple of years. So all of a sudden you're using information from 2 or 3 years ago, along with maybe some current information to figure out what your business is worth. But that's very dangerous because you've got old multiples in there and not completely current. So using public information is completely current and gives you a very good idea of how investors in the marketplace are valuing companies like yours.
Use
I
the
think
analogy that
using transactions, you don't necessarily know what the motivations are of the buyer. Again, a strategic is going to pay more. There might be something hidden in the company that they're willing to pay a lot for, and that's been booked into the transaction.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And having done valuation work, almost my entire career for 35 years, I
Yep.
can tell you that it's very hard to get really, really accurate valuation information on private transactions.
Right.
Um, it's super easy to get it on, what Apple's worth and any other public company, and that's a very, very good barometer. You may have to make some adjustment based on the size of your business compared to the public companies, and we provide some guidance on how to do that.
Good. So we're now 20 minutes to the end, and I guess we should turn to how financial executives use this information.
Sure, yeah, no, that would be great. There are a number of ways to use it, but one I'll start off with, and Charlie, certainly can pipe in about some of the others that we talk about. But one of the ones that I think is really, really important, because I see this all the time working with clients, is if you're approached by a buyer, um, and they make an offer for your company, if you don't know what your company is worth, you don't know how to react to the offer. You have to stop and say, wait a minute, and you might have to hire an outside expert to do the valuation work. And you may have to hire an investment banker at that point, but you're pausing the whole process probably, you know, uh, 3 weeks to 3 to 5 weeks while somebody helps you figure out what the company is worth and whether the offer is in the ballpark. And you may waste a lot of time and only to find out that the offer is, 40% below what your company is really worth and you shouldn't spend any time on it. Or you might find out it's 20% above what your company is worth and maybe you should really think about selling. But again, you're not going to know that until the valuation work's done. That's the advantage of having a quick value valuation done every year. You have the number right in front of you when you're approached, and it could be by a buyer, but it also could be an investor who comes in and says, "Oh, I'd like to buy 20% of your company. I like what you're doing, and could you use some additional capital to grow the business?" Well, again, you just aren't really going to know about that until you do that work.
We
Yeah,
had a
and I,
very nice question in the chat
Yeah, I was going to
about
ask.
the liquidity discount to bring down the valuation from from public comparable to private.
Absolutely, and we didn't go into a lot of detail in this conversation, but we do so in the book. We think in general the discounts roughly 25 to 30% from public companies to private. So if you're going to if you're just based on a lot of analysis that's been done by others, and so you should apply that. We have a methodology in the book for looking at private comps and comparing them to the public comps to get some ballpark idea. But in general, it kind of comes in that range of 25 to 35%.
And by the way, the chat box is open for questions. We're kind of getting to the end here. We've got 15 minutes, and we would welcome questions to highlight issues that Reed and Charles have raised.
Yeah, that was a good question. So any others
Yes, thank you.
are welcome.
Keep going.
And then that's one use of having that information. Charlie, you want to talk about
well,
the
I
others?
wanted to add just a little bit about what you were saying about being prepared.
Yes.
And I think that valuation under any circumstances, including the traditional methods of valuation, there are always subjective components to it, and there's going to be challenge, there's going to be back and forth, there's certain art to it as well as science. But if you are going into negotiations and you're able to produce a thoughtful process that you've been through and to show this is where sort of that brutal honesty and show maybe over 5 years where you've added value and where now you may get challenged on certain aspects of it, but you've thought this through and you can make a very strong, compelling case versus you go in saying, at the last industry conference, a friend of mine told me that it was 9 times EBITDA, and that now you're sort of starting the negotiation at a disadvantage. So I think that's one
Yes.
of the, just going in prepared. You're able to make a coherent, cohesive argument. I think has a lot of value in and of itself. But then beyond that sort of
Oh,
transactional.
and Charlie, can I jump in with one example, real life example that just happened in the last few months in my business? What we were hired to do to help a company. They wanted to buy another company, and they were going to use their own equity and cash to do the transaction. So
Mhm.
what we had to do, and we used QuickValue to do it, is we had to value the target company, but we also had to value the buyer because the target company was going to get cash, but they were going to get equity on the buyer. So they needed to know what the buyer's company was worth, because that was part of the consideration.
Right.
And so we did that exercise, and unexpectedly, our client, who was the buyer, was approached by another buyer saying they wanted to buy the company, and they made an offer. And we were able to then take the valuation that we prepared and share it with the buyer that made the offer and working up a counter offer. And in doing that, we were able to increase the price from the first offer by about 30%. So it was a big win for our client, and they got to the point where there was a deal that was satisfactory. So that's a very good example of just being ready to go with the valuation, and then it became an important element in the negotiations.
And
Yeah.
that,
I think it's important. I've been through when I worked at CBS and even the Thomson Corporation. I think it's very important that everybody be on the same page in terms of the valuation, so that nobody's unhappy after the transaction closes if you're one of the people who's staying.
Correct.
yeah.
Correct. Yep, exactly.
And I think that beyond the idea of, we've talked a bunch about transactions, but even if a transaction is a year off or 5 years off or a decade off, um, our contention in the book is that valuation can be an integral part of your strategic planning, and that you can use the information that you're building to create sort of individual mini plans to target areas of your company that are lagging, where you're doing well, you could do better, areas that are vital, but you're really not where you should be, and create, identify clear overarching goals, lay out some objectives, give yourself a timeline and an approach to improving specific parts of your business. And you're doing it not sort of on an ad hoc, hey, we noticed something's going wrong here, let's do something about it, but as a really strategic part of your overall plan. I think that sort of brings home what the importance of knowing your value on an ongoing basis.
We have two very nice questions. If you have multi-product and multi-division organizations, do you apply specific value drivers for each product and division and consolidate it for the parent company with some adjustments?
Yeah, that once again, that's a really good question and something we put a lot of thought into in the book. Um, Part of, again, the thesis of the book is that what makes companies different is that they have, particularly companies that have different products and different divisions, is that you can't just say this company's in this industry, therefore it gets this multiple. You have to break it down and say, well, look, they have, 4 or 5 different businesses within one business. So you have to value each of those businesses within the business using the value drivers and the multiples, and then add them together to get the full value of the business. And we use an example in the book that I think is really interesting. I think it was Disney who bought a company for over $5 billion. And 3 years later, they valued the business after the acquisition, and they valued it at 1.4 billion. And it was like, hey, what
Yeah.
happened to the $3.6 billion that we paid for this business? So, if you're not looking at valuation every year, things can get away from you. Um, and you do have to look at it by division because, and I think Charlie mentioned this earlier, you want to emphasize the parts of the business that are more valuable and the parts of the business that are growing, and you should de-emphasize the parts of the business that are losing value, perhaps. We've seen clients who um, work on turning around a business, and they do all kinds of work, and they successfully turn the business around, but they turned around the part of the business that's valued at the lowest multiple, maybe 4 times EBITDA. They should have been working on the parts of the business that are valued at 10 times EBITDA. And it's just mind-boggling to me when I get into situations like that, just because owners don't think that way. But so I think that I hope that answers the question. We want to obviously allow enough time to
Yeah.
answer the next question
So
as
we have
well.
another question for buying companies. The valuation, was it done before? I think they were there. He's
Oh,
talking
the
about
example?
something you were
Yeah.
discussing. Was it done before, as is, and after the transaction? You kind of went into it a little bit. The
Um,
before and after valuation.
yeah. Valuations are really done when we do it in QuickValue. It's based on what the value of your company is, right now at this point in time. And we may factor in um, what your future forecast is, that may play into the value drivers, your visibility on revenue and things like that.
Mhm.
But we're telling you right now what your company is worth. Now, that is not saying what it might be worth to a different buyer. We're not able to say, well, if IBM comes in to buy your company versus, say, Microsoft, IBM might see more value in your business than Microsoft and be willing to pay a higher valuation because they see elements of your business that they can use to drive a lot more revenue and growth in their own business. And so they're calculating that into the value that they are ascribing to the company. And what we try to do when we're selling companies is we try to get the buyers to think that way and run a competitive process, because if somebody wants to buy your business um, and we're representing you as a seller, we want them to buy your business for closer to what they think it's worth rather than just what any buyer thinks it's worth, so that we're getting part of that value from the buyer that they're ascribing to your company. It's maybe a little complicated to explain, but buyers in general want to hold that part of the value and reap that for themselves after they own your company. They don't want to give it to you as because they don't think you deserve it, because you haven't created the value yet, and they're going to create the value. But in a competitive sales process, they will stretch on valuation and rationalize why they should pay more for your company, because they want to win the bidding process because the acquisition is important to them. So that's an example of how different people are valuing companies in different ways. And a lot of times when we sell a company, we get, I just saw an analysis, we had 12 offers, and they range from, some people thought the company was worth 30 million and others thought it was worth 55 million. And everybody else was somewhere in between. And it's like amazing, that, you can get that kind of variation in how people are valuing a company. But a lot of it comes down to assessing value drivers. And because that's something that's qualitative, people, the buyers are assessing those things differently than other buyers.
Yeah, I think the rule is the highest and best offer, which if you're staying with a company, you want to know that they understand your business and that they're going to help you if you're, especially if you have an earnout, they're going to help you
Oh yeah,
drive that
absolutely.
value.
Very, very important. Very important.
So since this is an audience of mostly CFOs and controllers, I think your last point on your outline is very important, how it elevates the role of the CFO or controller
Yeah,
in
Charlie.
being the
Yeah.
driving force behind the quick value assessments.
Yeah, I think we've actually written some articles about this that CFOs might either formally or informally think of themselves as chief value creation officers, and that the as CFOs know better than we do that the role has evolved and expanded, and it's not just sort of the
It's well
spreadsheet.
beyond the bookkeeping department now.
Not the spreadsheet coding counterpoint to the CEO's brash creativity, but the CFO is becoming so much more integral and strategic and part of the company's vision forward that sort of creating a track record, almost that as we're suggesting that the yearly valuation process does for the company, that creating a track record of having built value for companies or been an integral part of building value for companies on a year-on-year basis, really, I would think, ups your value to any company moving forward.
Yeah, being the center of attention has its advantages.
And one of the things that does is it allows the CFO to instead of just saying no, let's not spend the money on such and such, let's not add that to the budget. We don't, it allows the conversation to be around value creation, so that it's not just saying no to an expense, but it's like, how is that expense going to increase the overall value of the business?
Yeah. Yeah, if the CEO has an idea that's it's not just yes, I mean it's how is that which of our key value drivers here is this going to enhance, and is it going to support that part of the business that is sort of going away, or is it going to help build value in that area that's most important to us?
Yeah,
I,
and
I used to joke that I was in charge of the word no, but I had limited authority.
yeah,
But here you're giving people the tools to say yes or no intelligently.
Would back it up. Yes, exactly.
and we think that thinking about your role as Chief Value Creation Officer really elevates the CFO's role, rather than the CEO handling the creative part of the business and the CFO maybe handling the, reporting and the expense side of the business. It brings the CFOs to a higher level in the discussion as a partner to the CEO in terms of figuring out which initiatives make sense and which ones are going to create value. And it just changes the dialogue, I think, between the CFO and the CEO.
Yeah, one of the great quotes I read many, many years ago was that great CEOs oftentimes have a poorly developed sense of fear. And the CFO, of course, that's why they don't make good CEOs, is they know the risks of everything. Between the two of them, it's very helpful. As my boss in the advertising business said to me when he was leaving, it was something along the lines of, "I'm glad we put up with each other all these years."
Okay.
And it was so true. So we're into the closing few minutes. Any
Oh, might have one more
comments?
question.
Just says, Matt, appreciate for organizing a very insightful discussion on a very important topic with Reed and Charlie. So thank you both for
This was a great discussion.
great discussion and very sharing your thoughts. And you are so right. It's all about the data. If you don't have the data, how can you have the conversation?
Right.
Any final thought, any final wrap-up
Well, I
thoughts,
just want to say
Charles?
thank you for hosting this, and it's been a pleasure getting to know you and to learn more about your wonderful organization. It really is, the work you do is
Thank you. No,
fantastic.
this was a great discussion. Reed, any final comments? You get the last word.
No, same thing really that Charlie said. It's we love talking to groups like this, especially with the really good questions that came from you, Matt, and from some of the attendees that really helped drive the discussion in an interesting way.
Thank you. Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining me on Chat with Matt. We've had a wonderful discussion with Reed and Charles about their book, which I assume is available on Amazon. You're willing to sell it?
It is, yeah. McGraw Hill was the publisher, and
okay.
it is indeed available on Amazon. I think I just looked the other day; it's only $20 now. I think it was originally
See?
28. So the Amazon discount.
That's apparently its quick value. I'm just trying to
Exactly.
bring us full circle here.
I like that. I like that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me on Chat with Matt. It was a great discussion, and it has been recorded. And for those who missed out, you can tell your friends about it and say, well, when the recording is available, please do listen to it. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.